Anyway, hopefully you can all hear me really well, and I'm hoping we might have a few more people come through, but we will make a start. I really do want to start first of all by saying thank you so much for your time if you're a volunteer already. I can't emphasise enough how much we appreciate all your help and value the time that you give to support our girls with their reading. The main purpose of this afternoon is first of all just to get together, put names to faces and familiarise ourselves with one another, especially from my perspective, because I know you've been emailing. I'm Mrs. Wild, and I'm lucky enough to oversee phonics and reading across Key Stage 1 and Key Stage 2 this year, which is so exciting. And just so you know, my working days are a Tuesday and a Wednesday, so if we have been emailing and I haven't been able to respond to your email on a particular day, that's why, and I will endeavour to get back to you as quickly as I can going forward. And as well as meeting one another, this afternoon is hopefully going to give you a chance to pick up some more tips and strategies, not just for reading with the girls in school, for your reading sessions, if you're a volunteer already, but hopefully give you a little toolbox, if you like, for reading at home with your own children or grandchildren or whoever you might look after. We're going to talk a bit about reading for pleasure, which is such an important area of development, not just in school, but outside of school and across the nation at the moment. And we'll delve into specific skills in particular, such as the phonics side of things, which is the decoding, so kind of mechanics of how we actually get our children to read, mainly. Developing comprehension skills and fluency, which is really important, I can't stress that enough. And then in terms of what a reading session might look like for you, that's what we're going to go into in a lot of detail to equip you with a bank of ideas, if you like, so that you can start your sessions in the most productive way and feel like we've done everything we can to support you in doing so. We'll go into examples of specific questions, a kind of repertoire, if you like, of activities as well, because I think sometimes we think of reading as just reading the pages in a book, and actually that's not always the case. So finally, we will complete this afternoon with a kind of a summary of the actual process of signing up, because I know some of you are already existing volunteers and others of you are looking to sign up. So I thought I'd start first of all just by really emphasising how much we do appreciate your time. We know it's life is busy, isn't it? And on behalf of all of the girls and staff, here are just a few examples of thanks from our girls for just some of our volunteers. So I hope you can see why.
I liked Mrs. Sharma when she would help me reading, because she was always there when you were stuck on a question. She would always be there to help when you didn't understand something. She would be there. She always chose a really good book, and when you understood a book, she left you and said, like, what did you like about the book? And if you were confused about it, she would always ask you a question to see what you needed help with.
I wanted to say a huge thank you to Mrs. Lee on behalf of all of Year 6, myself included, and all the girls that you read with. They greatly enjoyed the discussions about Hinder's War, particularly the way that you used their influence skills to test what was going on with their humanities studies about democracy in the British Empire, and then what they were reading in the text. Having drawing meaning from the context of the sentence about all their unfamiliar words. Thank you, Mrs. Lee, you were so helpful.
Mrs. Sharma helped me when I was reading. She didn't just write when I was reading. She waited till after I'd left to read. And when I was reading, I got a word wrong, she would always let me try and spell it out again just instead of saying the word.
I like reading with Mrs. Green because she was kind and she helped me with reading.
Thank you, Mrs. Epple, for reading with me. You were so nice and helpful.
I really liked reading with Mrs. Woods because she knew when I was stuck on a word and she helped me know what the word meant.
I like reading with Mrs. Harris because when you got stuck on a word, she always told you what it meant. And she was also really supportive. She taught you a lot about the book, and that made me understand it more. And she was really nice. I really liked reading with Miss Cole because she was really nice and she helped us when we got stuck on a word.
So we could have gone on and on and on. Honestly, the girls really value the time that they spend with you. It's that protected one-to-one time that they do look forward to each week, and hopefully for you it's a chance to build up a rapport with the girls. And like I said, we've got a bit of an issue at the moment with reading across the board. It's really sad that so many young children have fallen out of love with reading. The Department of Education published a review back in July, just before the holidays, really emphasising that schools need to reinstill that love of reading, get that passion going again, reading for pleasure, but also increasing the amount that children are reading. We actually did some pupil conferencing here as well, and it was really interesting and actually quite surprising how many girls don't particularly enjoy reading aloud in their spare time. Like, we know life is really busy and it's hard to fit everything in, but I think what message we want to convey this afternoon above anything else is just to prioritise reading, not just when you are in school, but also at home with your own children if you can. We want to move away from teaching children to read. Obviously that is what we're here for, but we want to encourage girls to read, to learn. And that's the difference, because if we're spending all of our energy and all of our time still, in Key Stage 2, focusing on those nuts and bolts, which are obviously really important, but the longer that we spend doing that, the less time we have to apply those skills to all aspects of the curriculum. And I think there's a greater awareness now. Research has shown that competent readers make for competent writers, and the recognition that reading aptitude is a reflection of general academic success. And it's not just the academic side of things, obviously, it's making sure that girls are reading books that they enjoy, and that can obviously manifest itself in lots of different aspects of your life. So that's what we want to make sure we're doing here. So I thought we would just have a really quick warm-up. What does this look like for you? If you just want to spend a couple of minutes thinking and then turning to the person next to you, just having a think about, okay, well, I've come into school, I've got my list of girls I'm going to read with, well, what on earth does that look like? What am I going to do? So if you wanted just to bounce some ideas around with one another for your experiences so far, or if you haven't come into school yet and you're hoping to sign up, have a think about what questions you might ask the girls, what skills might you need to be able to have a meaningful reading session with everybody. Don't be shy.
I suppose so, yeah. But with me, expression and
time. We've got quite a lot to get through this afternoon. So do you want to just feedback and share some of your thoughts so far? And you ask a question. Yeah.
Look, it's just interesting. I mentioned that I've got two daughters. One's a fanatical reader, and one won't read. So I have to kind of really cajole and find it. So we do all sorts of games. I read one line, she reads one line. I read a page, she reads a page. All sorts of clever things. I read it and I put in false words that she has to spot where I put in a stupid, funny word in a page. But do you think that with a child of that aptitude, you can do something to make her?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think we'll cover a little bit about reluctant readers, and we can talk more about what that looks like for you at home specifically, because I think we do have children, like I said, you know, who are reluctant, and it's important to get that balance between not pushing too much so that it puts them off, but also got to keep persevering and finding creative ways, which it sounds like you're already doing, to make sure that she's getting those experiences. And I do think it's one of those really hard things, but, you know, patience and just keep going with it. And we can also come up with some additional strategies. I'm sure you'll find some extra tools as well this afternoon. But if you do have a reluctant reader, there was a girl so I was doing some reading with girls in an art lesson, for example, and this particular child really was so involved in her artwork, and it was our time to read, but she didn't want to come, and I had a conversation with the TA in the class, and we decided, right, okay, we'll pause and then we'll come back to her, and even then at the end of the time that we had, she was still really reticent. And on that particular week, because she was so involved in her art, we had a very brief discussion, but I had to use my own judgment, and I could tell this was not going to be a productive session for either party, and we just had a really quick chat about front cover, and that was that. It was very brief. I think it's using our judgment sometimes to know when to back off, but in terms of what that looks like at home, we can talk more about specifics. Were there any questions and skills that you thought of that you would be using when you're having that time and you're listening to a girl read in school? Did you? Yeah.
I think using the bookmarks as a good guide to help prompt when it comes to asking questions and when they're a bit older in terms of like predicting, and either bookmarks with the 6 different characters on.
Yes, the dogs.
I think that's been really helpful.
Brilliant.
When you're like, I don't know what to ask you, just having that prompt in front of you.
Yeah, fantastic. I'm really glad you said that. That's really useful feedback from our side, actually. We'll talk more about these dogs. If you're not familiar with them, they're dogs which are a visual aid. They're linked to each reading skill. We'll go into more detail about those later. But as you can see, when the girls are reading aloud, these are some of the skills that they are using. As you can see, there are a lot. So our main aim is reading for meaning. Otherwise, just a simple decoding, which is sounding out, so applying sounds and blending. If it's just the mechanics, there's no meaning, there's no pleasure behind it. The words are just words on a page, and that's all they are. So the decoding and the sounding out is obviously where our phonics comes in. We'll talk more about that on the next couple of slides. For your reference, high-frequency words are a mixture of words which can be sounded out and can't be sounded out. These are the first 100 words which children will be familiar with in their lives, words which they should know and be able to recognise. So the tricky words, which also can be referred to as red words, linked to our read-writing phonics scheme. So if you hear a child talking about a red word, or if you want to mirror that language, that would be brilliant. A red word or a tricky word is a word that cannot be phonetically sounded out. So a word like the, for example, or said. So it's making sure that the girls, particularly down in Key Stage 1, are familiar with those. So if they start to try using their sounds, they're not going to get anywhere. So ideally our aim is to highlight that that is a word that just needs to be learnt by sight. So chunking is a really useful strategy that you can encourage the girls to use where there's a longer word and they need to break it down. So simply using your thumb to cover up the second part of the word, a compound word. An example would be sunflower, perhaps, where you're covering up the flower and then equally covering up the sun, just so it makes it more manageable for the children. Fluency is a really, really important part of reading. It's a massive focus for us as a school at the moment as well, and without the fluency, again, it's stilted reading, there's no reading for meaning. And within the fluency skills, we've obviously got expression, making sure the girls are reading with natural rhythm, it's not monotonous. We're concentrating on phrasing, smoothness. Can they adjust the pace that they're reading to reflect the words on the page, so to reflect what's actually happening? Those are the skills we're looking for. Pausing at punctuation, that's a really important skill that the girls in reception in Year 1 are starting to work on already, where they're identifying the full stops, but not only that, commas, so they're taking natural pauses with their breath. We want them to show the emotion, particular characters, or to reflect a feeling behind an event in the story, just so they're really engaging and they're showing you that their understanding is sound. Self-correcting is a really important skill that we encourage the girls to do, and this is an interesting one for you in particular. I think sometimes it's difficult, isn't it, when you're listening to a child read. It's hard sometimes to know when to intervene and when to help. Our instincts as parents and helpers is to, I guess, jump in a little bit sooner than we perhaps should. So we really need to make sure we're giving the children time to self-correct, to spot those errors themselves, because that is what is going to help them to progress as independent learners more than anything else, more than us spotting the mistakes for them. So can they spot if a sentence doesn't sound quite right, or have they missed out a sentence? Does the story not quite make sense anymore? Why not? Can they go back and reread? That's what we're looking for. Retelling. This is a really important skill. We'll talk more about this later. To summarise what's happened in a text. Using pictures. Don't underestimate the importance of pictures in Key Stage 2. There's so many clues. Sometimes when we're doing a group read or a pair read in Year 4 or Year 5, the time that we will spend unpicking the pictures is significant. You can get so much information from that, and I think it's really nice for the girls to be able to do that rather than just reading the words on the page. Predicting what might happen next. Really, really important, using those inference skills to make sure they're really engaged with the story and they're using those higher order reasoning skills. And we briefly mentioned this, just going back and cross-checking if something doesn't quite sound right. So I wanted to highlight from a decoding and a phonics perspective, the scheme that we use in school is Read, Write, Ink. It is such a fantastic scheme. I'm so passionate about phonics, I can't emphasise this enough. It is proven that a synthetics phonics programme is the quickest and most successful way to get most children reading quickly and successfully. The only caveat to that is that not every child will learn to read. They will struggle with some of those sounds, in which case the sight words and learning particular words is more important than ever. So just for your reference, in class, in our phonics groups, we talk about special friends. So a special friend will be a digraph or a trigraph, and those are two letters making one sound for a digraph. So the ch sound or a sh. So if a child is having difficulty sounding out, please highlight that if you can. We're not expecting you to learn all of these, but it's just so you are aware that that's the language and terminology that we're using in school, And if you can and are able to reflect that in your session, it will be so powerful for the children. We're all singing from the same hymn sheet. Fred Talk essentially is sounding out, so breaking down a word into the individual sounds. This would be at, for example, and blending, so putting those sounds together to make cat. Green words, I mentioned the words that can be phonetically sounded out, so those are your green words. Red words, or tricky words, are the words which can't be sounded out and need to be learned. Fred in your head is when they are sounding out, but they're doing so in their head, and that's to develop speed. Speedy words are decodable words that the children should be able to read straight away. It links to the high frequency words. And then again, from a phonics perspective, you won't come across this, but just so you know, a nonsense alien word is just a completely made up word that they will come across in read writing just to test their ability to specifically sound out. You can't apply any context to the word, which is obviously what the girls are doing most of the time within their reading. So that's just so you are aware. And you might see some of our complex speed sound charts around the school in corridors or reading areas. Feel free to use this. This is for your benefit as well as everybody else's. It's just a sort of aid memoir, if you like, of the alternative sounds. As you can see, phonics is quite complex, it's quite tricky. So if, particularly for the younger children, they are having difficulties sounding out, feel free to reference this if it's helpful for you. So when you are having a reading session, it's not just reading. Ideally, we really should be spending about 50% of our time discussing the text, not just listening to them read. And that could look like questioning, a discussion before you've even opened the book. We'll talk more about specific examples of those types of questions that you can ask. But the idea is that the discussion will help develop the inference and deduction skills which make for a competent reader. So not just asking literal questions, but asking higher order questioning where they are having to prove their answer. So using evidence from the text to support their thinking. And again, when you're having these high quality conversations, it doesn't have to be just discussing the text, finding synonyms, for example, playing hunt the word or the fastest finger first. Can you find me the word that shows me how the character's feeling as quickly as you can? That sort of thing. Those, particularly for reluctant readers, can be a good way to just mix things up a bit and engage them if they need to have a bit of a brain break, or, you know, you feel like you need to change direction slightly. Progression from oral comprehension answers is something that is really useful, particularly sort of year 1 and year 2 level, where we're encouraging the girls, particularly at the end of year 1 now, to be able to formulate their answers in a full sentence. This will obviously help them with their progression throughout Key Stage 2 when they're answering formal comprehension questions in a written context. So we're building those skills down in Key Stage 1 to help with that. So please feel free to push them. If they're giving you answers and they're one-word answers, encourage them to answer in a full sentence. So you may have already seen these dogs, we've just talked about them briefly. There is a real emphasis on developing specific reading skills and highlighting specific skills, because as we all know, when you're reading, you cannot just use one skill. It doesn't work like that. It's not natural. So we use these Pawsome Pals as a visual aid for the girls to highlight these skills. For example, if you're discussing specific vocabulary, you might like to reference the fact that that is Victor, vocabulary Victor. If in your discussion or your questioning, you're asking the girls to find specific words in the text, they are retrieving those words. So you're using Rex Retriever. Prediction. You've got prediction Pip. Again, inference Iggy. where you're hunting for clues, so you're using those inference and deduction skills. And at the end, perhaps when you're summarising what's happened in a text, you would like to reference Suki, sequencing Suki for ordering events, which is a really important skill to be able to summarise succinctly using evidence from the text, using your own words. That's what we want the girls to be able to do. So in each year group reading folder, which I hope some of you have already had access to, and if not, come and find me. I'll explain these in more detail, but essentially each year group has a reading folder, and the idea is that when you are reading, it's there in front of you for you to be able to reference. We don't expect you to remember these, offhand, and broken down into each subsection, we've got specific examples, which might be on a bookmark or on an A4 sheet of paper, depending on the year group. So hopefully you never feel like you are struggling to think of some questions to ask. And you might like to focus on a skill each week if the book that you're reading lends itself to that, or if the class teacher has asked. It really depends, but what we want to do is make sure that we're giving you all of the knowledge, all of the information, all of the strategies and skills, so that you feel empowered to be able to do so that time that you've got reading with the girls is as meaningful and rewarding for you and the child, to make sure it's as high quality as it possibly can be.
Emma, excuse me, don't.
So I won't go into specifics with these, but we'll send out these slides so you can see them in more detail, and like I said, they will be there for you within each year group reading folder. So we talked about how even before you start reading, look at the blurb, look at the front cover, what is there, who is the author of the story, who's the illustrator, what genre is this text. That obviously is perhaps slightly more applicable to the older girls. It depends what book you've been asked to read. What clues can we get from the picture? What might this be about? Making links to the girls' experiences, depending on what's happening. And again, if you have somebody who is slightly reticent to read, feel free to do a picture walkthrough where you're not actually reading anything to start off with, you're just using the pictures. That can sometimes be quite a useful tool to entice them and get that spark going. Questioning throughout the book. So don't feel afraid to pause as you're reading, check in. Who's your favourite character so far? But not just who's your favourite character, or how do you think the story might end? You're always asking why, to develop those reasoning skills, getting the girls to justify their opinions and explanations to develop that confidence. Did you like this story? Are you liking it so far? No, that's absolutely fine. Why? As long as they can explain. And obviously at the end, when you've finished, that discussion is key. Can they retell what has happened in the story? A summary, if you like. Make up an alternative ending for the story. Does your opinion of this character change throughout the text? If you even met one of these characters, what would you say to them? Those sorts of things, where we're just trying to kind of move away from the actual words on the page and get them to talk about the plot. We were reading last week, I was reading a book with reception about a new bike, and the conversations that we had around what their scooters and bikes look like, fulfilled most of our conversation, but it was really nice to see that they could make those links to the text, and that's really important. So, what might a session look like for you? We put together a menu, if you will, of different activities, different ways that you can read and listen to the children. It might be that you actually only read a paragraph, and that's absolutely fine. We can't stress enough that it's quality and not quantity. Please don't feel any pressure to race through a book. Sometimes it's actually quite nice because it leaves the girls wanting to find out what's going to happen next, gets that excitement going. So with a repeated read, for example, you might just be focusing on a paragraph, and both of you are rereading it several times to develop that understanding and their delivery, whether it's their pace. Are they reading it in a monotonous tone, and that stands out for you? So this would be a useful one to practice. A choral read is where you're both reading together. Okay, so she's reading or he's reading along with you in unison, and you are modelling the pace or the expression, and they are copying. Again, that might take a couple of times to nail, but yeah, that's again a really useful way to develop that fluency. An echo read is where the adult, or if you're doing a pair read, for example, you know, and you've got a mixed ability grouping, you would model part of the text aloud, and again you would use different intonation and expression, and then they would listen to you and then repeat it back. Paired read, again where you're taking it in turn to read paragraphs, and you're developing that flow of reading, and you're mirroring what you would expect them to see. The bottom is one of my favourites. I think it's really important to remember that protected time that you've got with the children is away from other people. Ideally, it's in a quiet space. There's no judgment there. That's the message that we want to get across to the girls. This is the time to kind of be a bit silly, to put on different voices. I'm going to show you an example of a Key Stage 2 child reading with Mrs. McNeil, and how she's actually modelling a raucous laugh. You know, I think sometimes it's really important to let go of inhibitions and within that time show them how you are developing those skills, so you are reflecting a different mood or emotion within the text. I thought I would just give some specifics here. A question that we're asked a lot is how long should I spend reading? And that really depends on the child, it depends on the class, it depends on what lesson's going on, so use your judgment. Please don't feel that you need to rush through the text like I said. How much help should I give? Hopefully that's clear now that we really want the girls to try and troubleshoot something themselves if it doesn't quite sound right. Can they spot that themselves, and how are they able to rectify that? Strategies, I'm hoping that your toolbox is filling up with ideas and strategies, but again, the printouts are there for you to have in front of you, so don't feel like you have to remember them. The comments, these will vary. Sometimes they might be written down on a sticky label or in the girls' reading logs. And please, could you try and be as specific as possible with those comments? It's really tempting, isn't it, to say, to be so positive all the time. Great reading today, exclamation mark. Lovely reading, exclamation mark. That doesn't really help the parents or the teachers understand exactly where they're at or what you actually covered in a little session. So please don't be afraid to be honest. There's obviously ways of saying things, but again, try and be as specific as possible. If there was careful sounding out, please try and reference that if you can. If there are some words that a particular child found really difficult, feel free to write them down, or if there was a specific sound, if it's a reception or year 1 child or year 2 child, write it down so that then the parents at home can reflect those in their time with the girls. And again, when you are listening, don't be afraid to give that specific feedback orally. The children really enjoy hearing, obviously, what they're doing well, but I think it's really nice to help them know what skills they need to work on as well. So try and put a little target if you can, or just tell them. I love the way that you self-corrected, and I think that you could develop your expression when different characters are talking. There's ways of being really positive and giving them an area to improve on, hopefully without using the word but. So by using the word and instead, that's a really useful way for the girls to receive that feedback and move their reading on. What should I do if a child is reluctant to read? We've covered that and we'll talk more about that perhaps afterwards. And what should I do if I can't come in to read? We so understand that there are appointments and different things that crop up, family events, etc. I think it's just a mutual appreciation that you are giving up your time, but the girls really do value your time each week. So if you feel that circumstances are changing and you're not able to come in weekly, please let us know so that we can try and get a spread of volunteers across the year groups where there is that consistent support. We really do need more reading volunteers, not just for reading but also for maths. Mr. Staines, head of maths, is really keen for help if you are a mathematician or you feel like you are able to support with maths. Please also come and let me know, or if you have any family members or people who you know who you think would be itching to sign up, please spread the word. We'd be so grateful. This is an example here where you can see what it looks like in practice.
So, have a look at the title of the book, Holly. What's it called?
The Boy and the Gobble.
It does look a bit like Gobble, doesn't it? Do you want to have another go? Try and sound out those letters together. What did you say? Gull.
Globe.
The Boy and the Globe. Are there any other clues as to what this book might be about on the front cover? What's this here?
Feather.
Feather. What are feathers sometimes used for? As well as for flying, obviously. What do people sometimes use feathers for?
Writing.
That might be a bit of a clue, mightn't it? You ever heard of something called the globe? You might not have done. Let's have a look together and see. The Boy and the Globe. Ooh. We've got more feathers, and what's this here, do you know?
Ink.
Ink. Yeah, we've got a book and we've got a skull. I think they might be clues as well. Let's have a look together. Loads of pages. Oh my goodness, okay. What does this say?
The Cast.
The Cast. We've got Toby Cuff, an orphan boy, Jack Filcher, a young thief, William Shakespeare, a writer of plays. Does that ring a bell? William Shakespeare? Okay, and here we've got, what do you think this building is? What do you think? It's sort of round, isn't it?
Maybe somewhere where you perform.
If we've got William Shakespeare who wrote plays, and it says it's set in London and the years are 1611 and 1623, so we're thinking back to before the Great Fire of London, aren't we? Because that was what year, do you remember? Yeah, so a bit before that time. Okay, so we're talking about history, and it's all set out a bit like it's a play. Let's have a look. The story. Right, start us off.
The inn stood on the corner of a narrow street.
Before you start that, what's the subtitle here?
Queen of the Pickpocket.
What's a pickpocket, do you think? Think about what the word actually says, pickpocket. What do you think a pickpocket might do?
Take something out of the pocket.
So who do you think the queen of the pickpockets might be? I think
Someone who does that a lot.
Oh, okay, let's have a look. So start this sentence again.
The inn stood on the corner of a narrow street, just off Cheapside. The great road that led from St Paul's and into the heart of London.
Do you know what St Paul's is?
St Paul's Cathedral.
It is, absolutely. Have you seen it before with the big dome? Okay, so this is the road, Cheapside, that goes from St Paul's all the way into the heart of London. So that's put us into the setting. Good.
The sign over the door said, "The Devil's
Try and sound it out. Tavern, okay? And this isn't devil, it's
Devil.
the Devil's Tavern. Any idea what a tavern might be? So this, it said here, the...
Inn.
Do you know what an inn is?
The hotel.
Yeah, it's a bit like a hotel and a bit like a pub. Do you know what a pub is? Yeah? So you might stay there, or you might go and have a meal there or a drink there. So a tavern is the same sort of thing. It's quite an old-fashioned word for it. So the sign over the door said the Devil's Tavern. If it's the Devil's Tavern, do you think it'd be somewhere really lovely to go?
No.
No. What sort of people do you think would be in there? Thinking about what else we've found out as well. What sort of characters do you think we're going to come across in there?
Maybe some not very nice characters.
Let's have a look, shall we? Carry on.
This was the place Toby was looking for. He took a deep breath and went inside. Beyond the door was a large dark room full of people drinking and shouting, laughing.
It's a really unusual word, this. Let's try and let's break it down. So look at that first.
Raw.
Raw, good.
Raucously.
So, beyond the door was a large dark room full of people drinking and shouting and laughing raucously. It's got Lee on the end. What sort of word do you think it's going to be? It's got Lee on the end.
Verb.
Not a verb, an adverb. So it's describing how they're laughing, isn't it? So if they're the kind of people who go in the Devil's Tavern and they're shouting and drinking, how do you think they might be laughing? If it's raucously, what do you think that might mean?
Maybe then they're laughing.
Do you think they're just having a quiet little giggle to each other? So, do you think they might be going ha 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 instead? Yeah, like quite roughly. Raucously is kind of roughly and loudly, and maybe sort of a little bit aggressively. Yeah.
So hopefully you can get the sense from that session, the Key Stage 2 read, that actually the time spent reading the actual words on the pages is not that much compared to the discussion and the other skills involved. And I particularly like it, Mr. Minion is modelling a raucous laugh, you know, and hopefully that will be a memorable experience for Holly, and how she can really remember that story's now placed in context. She knows where that is in terms of history, and her experience of that text will be so much richer because of this conversation that they've had. So moving on, I'm conscious of time, and I hope I haven't kept you too long, but I wanted just to kind of run through the HR procedure for signing up. So if you have already signed up and you're good to go, bear with me, but if you haven't, HR based at the senior school are responsible for overseeing the paperwork side of things, if you like. So the DBS check. In order to volunteer, you need to have an enhanced DBS check, and also complete some procedures before you're able to come in. But just a general reminder, these are the expectations from the school. It's a commitment from you, which we're so grateful for. You're modelling a love of learning, you're supporting staff, and you're supporting the girls, as well as primarily maintaining confidentiality as well. It's important not to forget that. Feel free also to sign up to trips and visits. I've got one on the 2nd of November, which I know Mrs. Farr wanted me to mention. Year 3 are going on a trip to Fishbourne Palace, and Year 4 are going to the British Museum. So if you would like to come and you are signed up, please have a chat with Mrs. Farr at the end, and then she can get in touch with you. I mentioned the DBS check. That is so that you can read on a one-to-one basis with the children, and then the Level 1 safeguarding training is an online training. It is quite quick. to do, and then you have a certificate after that we then need to see evidence of, and a quick chat with our safeguarding lead in order to talk things through and just remind everybody of the procedures. So I hope that is transparent. The first step is to complete the online reply, which I'm hoping you have done. If you haven't already, please don't feel like you've missed the boat. As I mentioned, we are really grateful and looking for many more volunteers, so please feel free to sign up. We're so grateful. You make a really big difference. I can't underestimate that enough. So then HR will contact you, like I mentioned, to complete the personal details form, run the DBS check, and come into school. And when you do that, you'll just need to bring some documentation. And then you'll be invited to complete an interview and then hopefully get started and build up that rapport with the girls and hopefully have rewarding reading or maths experiences. So I hope that's been useful. Mrs. Farr's appeared. I have already mentioned your trips. Mrs. Farr, you'll be pleased to know. And like I mentioned, if you're not already signed up, just so we've got everybody covered, please can we just take your details down, and then we can make sure that nobody slips through the net and we can welcome you into school as quickly as possible. So thank you so much for coming. I hope it's been helpful. If you have any other questions, do come to me. Help yourself to tea and coffee if you haven't already done so. And yes, thank you once again.
Sorry, Mrs. Wild.
Yeah.
Just one just feedback from where year 6. That just when people were talking about reluctant readers, one thing that has been really inspiring for our girls is the author visits. And obviously the school do an incredible job at them, but locally there is quite a lot of author visits. Recently the school alerted us actually to Cat Cow coming to Waterstones, and one of her books, Elle on the Outside, is actually on the recommended reading list for year 6. And we took the girls down. It was a fabulous evening. You know, she had a cake made, there was treats for them. She came and met them and signed their book. And they've since gone on now, they're sharing her books around and really enjoyed them. The same, I think, Kate Kirby is coming to Waterstones over the half term, who is, if those of you who might be familiar with Lottie Brooks's diaries, probably not on the recommended reading list, but it's kind of a laugh out loud book that they absolutely love. But the author visits are just so inspired because they then go and read the books. So it's something certainly we would really recommend.
Yeah, thank you so much for sharing that. We had Hester Cowlin this morning as well, and I think, you know, for those reluctant readers at home, cinema trips, theatre trips, it's not just the books that are sent home in the book bags. You know, I take my little boy to a cafe sometimes and they've got some books and we just sit and have a babycino and read together there. You know, your local library or charity shops are a great source for extending your reading material, but also getting your children to choose their own books as well. So we can, I almost feel like for reluctant readers we could do a whole session on those, because obviously, hopefully when you're reading in school, you're not going to be faced with so many of those experiences, if you like. You might have that more at home, unfortunately, which in a way, hopefully, at school we have covered in the reading and English workshop, but if not, I would like to send out a parent questionnaire actually in the near future, and any feedback like that, if you would like to see more from us in terms of ways to help you develop ways to engage readers at home, we can absolutely put something together, because I think reading really does deserve that focus now, and we're doing a really good job, thanks to you as well, in terms of instilling that pleasure for reading, that love of reading again. But I know sometimes it can take a bit of work. Yeah.
What is the time commitment for this? Sorry, we're just new to the school, so it's my first time. Is it weekly? Is it once a term?
For coming in to read, yes. Weekly. And obviously, it starts with you working out what time would work best for you, and then where it takes time is then marrying up that time with the girls' timetables. On a Thursday morning, for example, year 1 and year 2 are swimming. So it's a real movable feast to make sure that we've got that spread as well, and depending on the needs of the girls, the year group and the timetables and your schedule, that's what can take the time to sort of initially get things going. But then once your regular slot is in place, we do ask that you commit to that in as much as you possibly can. But like I said, I know appointments happen and some things just can't be helped, but please let the class teacher know, and you CC prep admin in as well. That's probably the better form of contact, rather than emailing me, just in case it's on a non-working day and I don't get to your email quickly enough, or if it's last minute, then the class teacher can know instantly. All right.
Do you have any more of the bookmarks, the dog ones?
I can get one to you,
Yeah.
definitely. If you would like one for home, if you email me, Sarah Wild at surbitonhouse.com. I'm sure you've got it already. Hopefully it was on the reading letter, or if not, Mrs. Farr can sort that out so we can get any information out. But these slides will be sent out to you as well. All right. Thank you so much. Help yourself to tea and coffee, and thank you again for coming.